The neighborhood had always looked peaceful from the outside. Rows of manicured lawns, carefully trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, and the kind of stillness that suggested perfect harmony. But beneath that surface lived the HOA board, a group of residents who believed control equaled safety, and who enforced their rules with a kind of rigid enthusiasm that often bordered on obsession. For years, many homeowners silently complied, choosing not to disturb the delicate balance. But everything changed the day I installed the security camera. The idea was simple. A series of late-night incidents had shaken the neighborhood, including rummaged mailboxes, unexplained footprints, and cars that seemed to move slightly overnight. Many brushed it off as kids or animals, but I believed it was something more deliberate. My own porch had been disturbed twice, with packages disappearing and the doormat repositioned in a way that felt intentional. After weighing the risks, I installed a discreet, motion-activated camera near my front door. It wasn't meant to spy or intrude, it was meant to protect. The footage quickly proved the installation wasn't a paranoid overreaction. Within the first week, it captured several suspicious walk-ins near my property. Though the people never approached my door, their behavior was unusual, weaving between driveways and sometimes lingering at mailboxes. Each recording reinforced the need for security. But the HOA saw it differently. It happened one quiet morning when an envelope appeared taped to my door. The letter inside was polished, formal, and almost condescending in tone. The board had noticed a prohibited exterior device on my property. According to their interpretation of the rules, visible cameras disrupted the neighborhood's visual uniformity. They demanded its immediate removal. They threatened fines and citations if I refused. The letter struck me as absurd. The community was facing real safety issues, yet the board seemed more concerned with maintaining appearances. The camera had become a symbol, not just of my right to secure my home, but of the HOA's fixation on control. Their threats made something shift inside me, replacing frustration with determination. I reviewed the HOA's governing documents carefully. To my disbelief, the board's claim didn't hold up. The rules allowed external devices reasonably installed for personal safety, provided they did not obstruct architectural harmony. My camera was small, neutral in color, and installed in a standard location. It wasn't violating anything. The more I read, the more I realized the board hadn't checked the rules. They simply didn't like being challenged. But instead of arguing, I began observing. Over the next few days, the HOA board members visited several homes, inspecting yards, peering over fences, and writing notes on clipboards. The camera captured them wandering onto private property without permission. They checked trash bins for rule compliance, measured garden borders with tape, and examined paint shades up close. Their behavior was far more intrusive than the camera they demanded I remove. As I studied the footage, I felt a growing sense of irony. The board was enforcing rules they themselves were violating. They entered properties without notice, conducted unauthorized inspections, and breached privacy in ways far more significant than a self-defense camera ever could. The footage built a quiet, compelling argument, one that painted the HOA as the true violator. A plan began forming in my mind. If the board wanted to police the community, then perhaps the community deserved to see how they did it. Instead of hiding the recordings, I decided to make them as public as possible. It wasn't about revenge at first, it was about transparency. Homeowners had the right to know how the people who governed them were behaving. I set up a livestream channel online, linking it directly to the camera feed. It ran continuously with an archive section that stored recordings. I added a simple caption describing the purpose, a 24/7 view of HOA activities around my home. The live stream wasn't designed to humiliate anyone. It was designed to reveal the truth. Within hours, viewers began tuning in. A trickle at first, then a steady stream. Neighbors shared the link among friends, sometimes with curious interest, sometimes with concern. People wanted to know what their elected board members were doing when they thought no one was watching. The live stream offered that chance. It didn't take long for the first shockwave to hit the community. Viewers quickly noticed moments the board likely never expected to be seen. A board member cutting across several lawns instead of using sidewalks. Another going through a resident's recycling bin. One measuring a porch plant with a ruler. another entering a backyard without knocking. Each instance contradicted the rules they ruthlessly enforced on everyone else. The HOA members had become unwilling stars of their own unscripted show. Soon, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet whispers. Some residents watched the stream religiously, discussing the footage like it was the latest dramatic series. Others kept their distance but couldn't escape the growing tension. The live stream had become a mirror reflecting the board's worst habits, and the board had no idea it existed yet. All the while, the original camera remained intact, untouched, and still very much active. A shift in power had begun. Not through confrontation, but through exposure. The community was awakening, questioning long-standing rules and the people who enforced them. The board, still unaware of the live stream, continued patrolling, unknowingly feeding the archive with every intrusive step they took. The first complaints surfaced quietly. A few neighbors approached the board asking about unauthorized yard inspections. Others questioned sudden citations they received despite having no prior issues. Confusion spread among homeowners as they realized the HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were hunting for violations. With each passing day, the live stream grew in popularity. Some viewers tuned in out of curiosity, others out of frustration, and a few simply enjoyed the spectacle. It became clear that the HOA board had underestimated the community's willingness to take control back. Eventually, the board couldn't ignore the growing distrust. They called an emergency meeting, notifying residents that false rumors were spreading. But by then, many had already seen too much. There was no going back. That night, something happened that marked the beginning of the turning point. One board member approached my property, clipboard in hand, pacing suspiciously near the driveway. When they thought the coast was clear, they crossed the property line and inspected my porch without permission. The live stream caught everything in sharp detail, broadcasting it live to dozens of residents watching from home. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. The HOA wasn't protecting the community. They were controlling it. And the camera they tried to ban had become the very tool exposing them. The fallout was only beginning, and I knew that once the board discovered the live stream, the real battle would start. The first chapter of this conflict had closed, but the next one promised escalation, tension, retaliation, and a community ready to stand up. The morning after the first wave of residents witnessed the board trespassing on camera, the entire neighborhood felt different. The stillness that usually accompanied the early hours carried a new kind of tension, subtle, sharp, and ready to erupt. People walked their dogs with quicker steps. Neighbors who usually waved politely now lingered at the end of driveways, exchanging quiet, meaningful looks. Something had shifted, and everyone felt it. The live stream, once a small curiosity, had become the community's unfiltered window into the HOA's private world of enforcement. It revealed habits that had long been whispered about but never proven. Late-night property checks, paperwork filled out in the dark, and patterns of favoritism that were impossible to deny. But the board members, blind to the unfolding exposure, continued their routine with the same stubborn confidence, until they discovered the truth. It started with a sudden flurry of movement at midday. A cluster of board members gathered near the community center, pacing with phones in hand, whispering urgently. One of them held a printout, an image that, even from a distance, I recognized instantly. It was a screenshot of my live stream. Someone had shown them. The secret was out. Within hours, the HOA issued an urgent compliance notice addressed specifically to me. It was harsher than anything I'd seen before, filled with accusations and veiled threats. They demanded the immediate removal of my security camera, labeling it a privacy-violating wildlife monitor, and accusing me of illegally filming community activity for public consumption. They claimed the live stream created panic and disorder among residents and insisted I shut it down to restore peace. Their message wasn't about rules anymore, it was about power and humiliation. The board had been caught, and instead of addressing their own misconduct, they focused on silencing the evidence. But by then, the community had seen too much. Many residents ignored the board's attempts at damage control. Some printed screenshots of the live stream and posted them in group chats. Others started checking their own property lines, looking for evidence of similar intrusions. The board's effort to shift blame backfired spectacularly. Still, the HOA wasn't done fighting. The next morning, the board launched what they called a full compliance sweep, an aggressive walkthrough of the neighborhood under the guise of routine assessment. They moved from house to house, jotting down notes and leaving citations taped to doors in a frantic attempt to reassert authority. Many residents received fines for minor issues: slightly tall grass, a faded mailbox number, a pot placed inches off regulation. The sudden crackdown felt like retaliation, and the community knew it, and the live stream captured everything. Residents watched as board members trespassed again and again, measuring yards without permission, peering through fences, and entering porches while believing no one was home. The viewer count on the stream tripled overnight. What was once a tool for personal safety had become a movement of collective accountability. The HOA's panic intensified. By the end of the week, they scheduled an emergency community meeting at the clubhouse. Mandatory attendance urged, though not required by any rule. The atmosphere that evening was electric. Neighbors filled the room, the board seated at the front behind a long table arranged to look authoritative. But the board members didn't appear confident. They looked strained, defensive, and painfully aware of the shifting tide. The board chair opened the meeting with a lengthy address about maintaining order and protecting the integrity of the community. They insisted the live stream created unrest and claimed it violated the privacy of residents. But the arguments rang hollow. Many in the room had seen board members on their property without consent. Others had witnessed fines escalate wildly in the past week. The board's attempt to regain control was failing before their eyes. Then came the turning point. A resident stood up and asked why board members were entering backyards at night. Another asked why citations were issued after dark. Someone else questioned the legality of their inspection process. The room filled with murmurs, quiet at first, then rising in unified frustration. The board scrambled to respond but offered nothing but vague explanations and deflections. At that moment, my live stream, still running silently from home, captured another critical event. 2 board members had returned to my property, pacing at my fence line, pointing at the camera, gesturing wildly. They appeared to be discussing ways to remove it themselves. Their agitation was obvious, and their disregard for boundaries even more so. The community had stepped into the clubhouse seeking answers, while the board had chosen to escalate behind the scenes. Word spread quickly. A resident near my home received a notification from the livestream and quietly showed their phone to others in the meeting. A ripple passed through the crowd. First confusion, then anger, then disbelief. The board, in real time, was violating the same property rights they accused me of breaching. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents confronted board members, demanding transparency, accountability, and resignation. Many questioned whether the HOA had abused its authority for years without challenge. The board's once firm posture crumbled under the combined weight of the community's outrage. Meanwhile, I watched everything unfold through my own camera feed, witnessing the reshaping of neighborhood dynamics from behind a screen. What began as a simple security measure had spiraled into the community's greatest test. The HOA, once feared, now looked uncertain and unprepared for the consequences of their own actions. But the board had one last move in them. Late that night, long after the meeting had disbanded, the camera captured a shadow moving toward my porch. A board member approached cautiously, glancing around before stepping onto my property. They carried a ladder and a toolkit, an unmistakable attempt to remove the camera themselves. It was a bold violation, a reckless act driven by desperation, and the entire neighborhood, still watching the live stream after the meeting, saw it happen live. Nothing the HOA did next could erase the fact that thousands of eyes witnessed one of their own attempting to destroy private property. The board had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. As the night settled into silence, the live stream continued recording, archiving every moment. The board's fear had transformed into reckless action, and their final attempt to regain power had only further exposed them. The next morning would not be calm. The neighborhood was no longer divided between the HOA and the residents. It was waking up united against an authority that had overstepped too far. The board's downfall was no longer a possibility. It was inevitable. The morning after the attempted camera removal arrived like the quiet before a storm. The neighborhood, normally alive with dog walkers and early risers, felt still, almost frozen. Everyone had seen the previous night's incident through the live stream. Every viewer had witnessed the board member sneaking onto my property with a ladder, attempting to sabotage the camera. The stream didn't just show a violation of rules. It revealed intent, desperation, and a disregard for every standard the HOA had sworn to uphold. The footage spread through the community faster than anything the HOA had ever tried to control. Residents shared clips in group chats, on neighborhood forums, and even on family social media accounts. People who never cared about HOA politics suddenly found themselves discussing it in detail. The board's authority had been shattered. Now, people demanded consequences. Within a few hours, residents began gathering outside the community office. They weren't yelling or causing a scene. They were simply waiting, staring at the locked door as if expecting the board to appear and face them. Word traveled that several homeowners were preparing to file formal complaints with city officials. Others contacted local legal advisors to document the board's actions. For the first time, the power dynamics had flipped entirely. And the camera, still intact and recording, continued to capture every moment. It didn't take long for the board to realize they were cornered. By midday, an emergency HOA announcement was taped to every mailbox in the neighborhood. The message claimed that the board member seen on camera had acted independently and without approval, and that the HOA was launching an internal investigation. But the attempt to distance the board from accountability only fueled residents' anger. Many had screenshot evidence of multiple board members violating rules on camera, not just one. The community knew the problem was not a single rogue individual. It was systemic. What happened next was the beginning of the end. A group of homeowners gathered in my front yard, not to intrude, but to speak collectively. They wanted answers, and more importantly, they wanted justice. They asked me about the live stream, how long it had been running, and what had been recorded. They wanted to understand the full extent of the board's actions. And as they listened, a common understanding formed among them, a sense of unity fueled by shared frustration. The residents decided to take action as a community. First, they compiled video clips from the live stream, trespassing incidents, unauthorized inspections, retaliatory behavior, and the attempted destruction of private property. They organized everything chronologically, labeling each violation clearly. Then they prepared a formal complaint document addressed not to the HOA, but to the city and the county-level homeowners regulatory office. Copies were submitted electronically and in person. The board's behavior was now officially on record. The second step was even more powerful. A petition began circulating throughout the neighborhood calling for the immediate removal of the entire HOA board. People signed eagerly, some adding notes describing past experiences of unfair treatment, inconsistent rule enforcement, and abusive behavior. Stories poured out, accounts of fines issued without warning, violations fabricated out of thin air, and board members showing favoritism towards certain residents. The petition grew quickly, reaching a majority of homeowners in less than a day. The third step sealed the board's fate. The residents pooled together resources and hired a private legal firm specializing in HOA abuse cases. They provided the lawyers with the live stream footage, documentation of past citations, and letters residents had kept for years. The lawyers recognized the magnitude of the case immediately. The HOA had not only violated its own bylaws but had also breached legal boundaries that could result in serious penalties. By the following morning, the legal team delivered a notice directly to the HOA office, a cease and desist order demanding the board halt all enforcement actions until the investigation was complete. Residents witnessed the document being delivered and felt a collective sense of triumph. The HOA had thrived on secrecy and intimidation for years, but now it was being held accountable in full view of the community. The board members attempted to salvage what little authority they had left. They held a closed-door meeting in the clubhouse, but the tension inside was palpable even from outside. Residents lingered nearby, watching as board members entered one by one, their expressions grim and defeated. After several hours, they emerged looking resigned, pale, and shaken. It was clear they had come to a decision. That evening, the HOA sent out a final announcement. The entire board was stepping down. The message attempted to frame their resignation as an act of responsibility, insisting they were leaving to allow fresh leadership to guide the community. But no one believed the polished wording. Everyone knew the truth. The livestream had exposed them, the residents had united against them, and the consequences had been unavoidable. In the days that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Residents held open discussions to nominate new board members, people known for fairness, transparency, and level-headedness. The new board promised to revise outdated rules, ensure inspections were properly scheduled and authorized, and establish clear communication channels. For the first time in years, the community felt hopeful. As for the camera, it remained exactly where it had always been. But its purpose had evolved. It had started as a personal safety measure, then became a tool for exposure, and ultimately symbolized the community's path toward reclaiming its rights. Neighbors who once criticized cameras now considered installing their own, not to surveil each other, but to protect themselves from unjust authority. The livestream channel, once a source of chaos, became a piece of neighborhood history. People occasionally revisited the archived footage to remind themselves of how far the community had come. With time, the neighborhood grew quieter, not from fear of the board, but from genuine peace. People tended to their homes without worrying about arbitrary penalties. Children played freely on sidewalks without board members hovering nearby. Gardens grew in vibrant colors that never would have been allowed under the old regime. The community had taken back control, and the difference was undeniable. As for me, I finally restored the sense of security I had sought all along. Not just through a camera, but through a neighborhood that now understood the power of standing together. What the HOA had tried to suppress, transparency, accountability, and truth, had become the very force that unseated them. In the end, the board's downfall wasn't caused by disobedience or rebellion. It was caused by their own actions, revealed openly for all to see. The camera they tried to ban became the lens through which justice arrived.